What if I told you that the majority of private investigators today spend more time reacting to situations rather than preparing for them? Unpreparedness is one of the biggest and the most costly mistakes that many PIs make, but it can be avoided many times with what we call pre-op recon. So, what is pre-op recon? Basically, what it stands for is Pre-Operative Reconnaissance. So let's break it down. Pre-operative, well, that means before you go out on a case, before you start the surveillance, before you start the major part of the investigation. Reconnaissance basically means a preliminary survey to gain information. So what does pre-op recon mean? Well, basically it is going out and getting a preliminary survey to gain information before you start your investigation, like for surveillance. What pre-op recon usually consists of is gathering background information on your target or your subject. The goal is to gather more information so you have a better understanding of the environment that you're going to be going into, the people that you're going to be investigating, and the activities that they may be doing. So what type of cases might you use pre-op recon for? Well, some could be high stakes or very sensitive cases. So if you are doing surveillance on a high profile individual, let's say, you will definitely want to go out and do pre-op recon on that so you know what you're getting into. I had a lot of cases early in my days where I went out and, just flying by the seat of my pants, and I pull up and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's security cameras everywhere. There's no place for me to park. How am I going to do the surveillance? I should have known that long before I ever got there. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. Or if you're working a highly sensitive case, a child custody case, something like that. If you're going to go in and do surveillance or you're going to go in and do a neighborhood canvass, it really helps if you go in and you do that pre-surveillance recon or that pre-op recon first, so you have a good idea when you go in to do that work of what you're getting yourself into. A good example for me where I will often do a pre-op recon is if I'm doing witness interviews at a static location. I've had this many times. I had a large case not too long ago where it involved a house blowing up. It was actually a gas explosion that had happened. And I had to interview literally hundreds of individuals. So I set up a static location to be able to do these witness interviews. But the first thing I did was I went out and I did a pre-op recon. I looked over the area. I looked to see, is this going to be suitable? Are my witnesses going to be able to get in easy and get out easy? Or are they going to be able to be surveilled if somebody else is surveilling them? I want to make sure that I'm protecting them as much as possible too. But in this case, we didn't have to worry about that protection for the witnesses as much. But I still looked for all of those things. This one was also dealing with a lot of elderly individuals. So dealing with them, I need to make sure that they could easily get to me where I was going to be doing the interviews, the room that I was going to be doing the interviews in. I wanted to make sure they didn't have a lot of stairs to go in. Another instance might be child custody. We get these from time to time where we're asked to go out and do surveillance, but there's going to be an exchange of the children. And when I do that, I always want to go out and do a pre-op recon. I want to know what I'm going to see when I get there. I want to know where are my vantage points. And I know you can do it online, and we're going to talk about some of that here in a little bit. But you can't do everything online as good as you can if you just go out and you do it. Surveillance, obviously, I mentioned that, and I've mentioned this in a lot of my videos. I almost always go out and do a pre-op recon when I have a surveillance case. So I'm going to go out to that neighborhood. I'm going to go out to that business, and I'm going to see what it looks like in real life. I know I can go online. I can get on Google. I can get on Google Earth. I can do all these things. But what am I looking at? I might be looking at a photo from a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I've seen some that are 20 or more years ago, especially when I get into rural country surveillance. What I also want to do when I do a pre-op recon on surveillance is I want to look for potential places that I can park. I want to see, is this really viable for me to do it? I know looking on Google, it looks like this area right here might be perfect for me to sit at. But then when I go out and I do my pre-op recon, I get there and I say, well, this probably isn't as advantageous. One of the things I look for when I'm doing that is, are there any police cars in any of the driveways? Is there a cop living in the neighborhood? If there's a police officer in the neighborhood, I can guarantee you all of the neighbors, probably your subject too, will know who that is, and they'll probably know them on a first name basis. So if they see a suspicious vehicle, who are they going to call first? Yeah, probably their buddy down the street or across the street. That's who they're going to call first. Pre-op recon also comes into play with process serving. Now, most of my process serves, I will just get on the internet and I'll look up the address and I'll kind of get a view of things and see where I might be able to park or run up and knock on the door and get the serve done. Most of them don't take a whole lot of extra work. But sometimes, if I know that I'm going to be serving somebody that might be a little difficult, if I know that it's going to be a large apartment complex, something like that, if I have the opportunity, I'm going to go in early. I'm going to do that pre-op recon first. This gives me a real good idea of if there's surveillance cameras around, if there's places for me to actually park or not park. Am I going to have to walk long distances? When it comes to wintertime, that's really important too, because you're going to need to know where you can and can't walk from a safety standpoint. I had one the other day where I need to sit out for a little bit to serve this guy because he was potentially trying to duck service. And I had done some pre-op recon on it. And when I went out there, lo and behold, in the driveway, the parking lot where you would normally park, it was completely covered in ice. Like if I had to park there and had to get out on foot and go chasing after the guy, I'd have probably killed myself. But I noticed on the other side, there was a sidewalk on the other side of this apartment building that was completely clean, and it led over to another part of the parking lot that was mostly clean. And I was able to go in there and I found his vehicle. So all I had to do then was park somewhere between his door and his vehicle. And sure enough, when I went out there the next day, during my little surveillance process serving, I went out about 6:30 in the morning, and here about 7:15, he comes walking out, going to work, and I was able to just get out of my car, follow him over to his car to make sure that was my guy, and then serve him the papers right there. And, you know, he wasn't trying to duck service, I don't think, because he didn't have any bad words. He's just like, oh, well, what's this about? And of course, I don't know. You need to talk with the attorneys and everything. You can give them a call. But surveillance recon on that one really helped me. Otherwise, I would have been parked in the main parking lot, or what looked like the main parking lot of the apartment building that was covered in ice. So why should you do pre-op recon in the first place? Well, as we said before, preparedness, to get yourself prepared for the case, especially on surveillances and things like that. You need to get that information ahead of time. And when should you do it? Well, it's going to depend on a lot of different things, what type of case it is. If it's surveillance, I try to go out a day or two before if possible. A lot of times I might be out on another case, and then I'll just swing by the case that I'm going to do tomorrow to see what it looks like. Now, if it's something like that child custody case that we were talking about earlier, where they're going to do an exchange of the children, I will usually go out many days ahead to go out and look at that. The reason being is because if the other side wanted to have somebody out there looking to see what it's like for themselves, or if they were out there, they're probably going to go out the day before or sometime really close to when the event is actually going to happen. So I want to go out several days before. I also want to go out ahead of time on something like that. So if there's issues that I need to let my client know about, well, there's no place to park or whatever, there's no place for me to be able to see what's going on, I need to be able to let them know. And then there's the question of how should you do pre-op recon? Again, it's going to depend on every case. Now, if it's surveillance, often I will try to go out and use a different vehicle other than my regular surveillance vehicle. But this isn't always an option. Like I said, sometimes I might be on a surveillance. Like I might be on a surveillance right now. I'm not, but I might be on a surveillance right now. And when I get done, I'm going to be kind of close to where I'm going to be going out on surveillance tomorrow. So I'll swing by there and I will be in my surveillance vehicle when I do that. But if it's a highly sensitive case, if it's a high profile case, if it's a case where I think the person that I'm going to be surveilling may be highly suspicious, then I definitely want to use a different vehicle. But if I think my subject of surveillance is going to be highly suspicious, if I really think they're going to be out there looking for surveillance, I want to go out a long time ahead before I go out. I want to go out a week before, or 2 weeks before sometimes. I've even done 3 weeks before. Doing that pre-op recon 2 or 3 weeks out before you go out on surveillance will a lot of times help alleviate those suspicions, even if the subject saw you and you were in a different vehicle. 2 or 3 weeks later, they're probably going to have forgotten about that incident. Now, a lot of times when I go out on a pre-op recon on a surveillance, I will also want to go on foot when I get there. I want to walk around the neighborhood. I want to see what's there. I don't want to just see what's right in front of my subject's residence. I want to see the entire neighborhood. So I'll do a drive around and I'll do a walk through and things like that. Now, here is a good tip if you have the abilities to do this. If you're going to go out on a pre-op recon and you're going to go on foot, and if you have a dog, take your dog along. Go for a walk through the neighborhood. You look just like any other neighbor just wandering around. Or if you have a bike and you have a bike rack or a way to be able to take your bike with you, then do that. Find a local park nearby and then get on the bike and go riding around the neighborhood. You're going to look a lot less suspicious doing something like that than just walking down the street. But remember, do not keep going past the subject's residence. If you do that, they're going to see you and they're going to know, well, you're just trying to get more intel. You're going to try to get more information. And don't just go past them and stop at the end of the block and then turn around and look down the street. That looks highly suspicious too. Now, I always use a covert camera when I go on these pre-op recons. I can carry that in my hand. I have one that looks like a cell phone. If you want, you can go to my website, www.howtobeapi.com, and you can go to the gear page and you can find all of the covert cameras that I use. I have one that looks like a cell phone that shoots the video out the top so you can just hold it normally. I have another one that I really like for these that is a keychain key fob on it, so it looks just like the key fob for your car. So you're just holding it like anybody might be holding their keys when they're walking around. Now, if it's going to be for something like that child custody case where we're talking about where they're going to do the exchange of the children or witness interviews, things like that, a good time to go out and do those is about the same time and on the same day of the week that you're going to go out and you're going to do your operation, just so you have a good idea of what it's really going to look like. Now, do you have to go out physically in the field to do a pre-op recon? No, you don't. There are plenty of things that you can do online. And, you know, I go out on a lot of pre-op recons, but to be honest, most of that pre-op recon is done sitting right here in my office. One of the things that I do is I conduct a full online research using databases and search engines, those digital tools that a private investigator needs to become an expert at so they can gather information on their target or their subject or the area that they're going to go. You can get on Google, you can get on Bing, you can get on DuckDuckGo, you can search that address and you can usually drop into a map and you can look around and you can see a lot of the things that you need to see. Where is a good place to park? Are people parking on the streets? That's a really good one you need to know. Do people park on the streets? If you pull up a satellite or an aerial view of a neighborhood on the internet and there's no cars parked on that street, well, you know what? That may be because there's no street parking, so you need to know that when you go in to do the surveillance or whatever you're going to be doing. I also try to review public records, things like court documents, property records, business registrations, things like that, so I can get some more information. I've had many cases where I've needed to do surveillance on somebody and I have found a business that they're tied to and I'm able to go to that business, or when they leave their house, I know kind of where they're potentially going to go. Whether they're an owner of the business, a registered agent of the business, or I just find something on a Google search that makes me believe that they're working at this particular business. I also like to access those property records, like on the county websites. That will usually give you a photo. It might be a dated photo, but it's a photo of the property. But a lot of times it's going to give you the layout of the house. You're going to know where the bedrooms are, where the kitchen is, where the living room is. So if you're doing surveillance, when you're sitting out there at 5 o'clock in the morning and the lights start to go on, you can kind of start to tell what's going on in the house. And you can tell if they own the property. If they own the property and they've owned the property for 25, 30 years, guess what? They probably know all of their neighbors, and all of their neighbors probably know them as well. And do a lot of Google searching for your subject or for the place that you're going to go, and try to gather any information that you can about your subject. That is probably one of the areas a lot of, especially surveillance investigators, fail at. They just get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they head out the door, and they are just showing up, flying by the seat of their pants. And then they're going to grab their phone, and then they're going to try to do all of that research. But do it beforehand so you have the information before you get out there. And then take all of that data and you need to analyze it. You really need to sift through it, and you need to write down notes that you need to know so you can put that on your cover sheet. Make sure that you don't forget to do that part as well. When it comes to surveillance planning, you need to be able to plan and coordinate your surveillance operations, including identifying potential vantage points where you can sit and you can do your static or your stationary surveillance from, what cameras you're going to use. I have a lot of different cameras. Now, most of the time, I just take out my regular video camera, but I also take my backup camera. Sometimes I'll take out my super zoom camera. If I know I'm going to be a long ways away, I can take out my super zoom camera so I can get zoomed in really good. And what covert cameras am I going to take? And what security measures do I need to take while I'm out there? That's really, really important to consider that. And that's part of that Pre-Op Recon, where you're going to look and see if there's any security risks, any areas in the neighborhood you need to make sure you keep your eyes on for anything that might jeopardize you or jeopardize your investigation. I try to monitor my subjects' social media activity so I can kind of tell what they may be going to do or may be doing at the time. Now, it's not as good as it used to be. Man, when social media first came out, everybody would get up in the morning and they'd post something about how their morning is going, and they would check into this place. They'd check into the gym and check into the restaurant and check into the coffee shop. They don't do that as much, but sometimes they will do that. Or you can just go back to their social media and go through the history of it, and you can see places that they have gone in the past. Geographical research, yep, we've talked about that. You want to make sure that you are researching the geography around, not just the street that you're going to do surveillance on, not just the building that you're going to be watching. You want to look at everything. You want to look at where are neighborhood parks, where are neighborhood stores, different things like that. You need to have a good idea of the entire area. Now, the big question that most PIs really struggle with is, should you charge for your pre-op recon? And the simple answer is yes. Now, the easiest way to do this is to make sure that it's built into your retainer. Your retainer for your case should include everything that you think is going to need to be done to get the case done, and that includes pre-op recon. Now, I use a retainer calculator that I created where I put in all of the information, how many hours a day I'm going to do surveillance or whatever it is, how much drive time there is, how much mileage there is, and it has case management time built into it. So I can say how many hours of case management time, and pre-op recon would be part of that case management time. Then I can give the client a flat fee for doing everything that I'm going to go out to do to initiate the investigation. If you want to see my calculator, go to howtobeapi.com and you can check it out. And if you want to know more about being a private investigator, then check out this video right here.